Well, thank you so much for everyone hanging around to the end of the day. I'm sure everyone's running out of steam a little bit, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'm going to try and make it a little bit lively and entertaining, because otherwise you'll be falling asleep. So I gave it a bit of a Harry Potter-style title, the Transforming Education, the Quest for the Magic Bullet. You know, magic bullets are the sort of thing that we would all like to find if we could. And my big kind of question after coming to lots of conferences like this is, if we could do one thing, if we could do one thing right for education that might fix some of the problems, what would it be? So I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of a story just to set the background, and it's a bit of a sad story and the sort that you might well have heard a bit before. You know, I got a call a while back from a friend of mine I was at university with more years ago than I care to remember. And before he'd been to university, he was teaching in his gap year in a school in Zimbabwe. And there was this kid there that he struck up a really strong relationship with called Samuel. Now, Samuel was one of the best kids in his class at maths, a really kind of gifted kid, obviously from a poor background in a poor area. And the future should have been absolutely bright for Samuel. But 20 years later, I'm getting a call from my friend asking me what he should do about his situation, because he's still in contact with this kid because they're a great relationship. But the kid now, 20 years on, despite his bright future, can't feed his family, hasn't got a job, his life is going disastrously. And my friend's asking me, you know, you work for a non-profit, you do things, you know, how can I help him? And it's a really tricky situation. And it's a tricky situation that should never happen, because that kid 20 years ago should have got an education, being super bright, that would have allowed him to be able to take care of himself and his family. But what he got was a traditional academic-based education. So whilst he did well in his maths classes and got his pieces of paper, you know, his future just didn't turn out the way he imagined. Yeah, I won't dwell on it. We've all seen, you know, the Ken Robinson kind of stuff on YouTube. He does it better than anyone else. But you just need to look at it to see, you know, this old model of education is outdated and irrelevant. The system is not responding. The system is broken. And this is one of the things I can never get my head around. I mean, we know this. Everyone's saying this at this conference, but it doesn't change. Why doesn't it change? Why do we come back to conferences like this year after year and it doesn't change? So what I want is that kind of, you know, mythical lever, the Archimedean thing. Give me a place to stand and I will move the world. You know, if I had a place to stand, what would that lever be? And my contention is that that lever has to be about measurement. If we can get measurement put in place so that we're actually measuring things that are meaningful, we might actually, over time, edge the system a bit more in the right direction. But the starting point, presumably, has to be education for what? You know, why are we doing all this work? Why are we making kids come every day, day in, day out to school? What's the benefit? You know, I guess everyone will have all sorts of different perspectives. Just to make it interactive, who would like to give me a kind of a suggestion? Education, why? Anyone from the crowd? Autonomy, to take direction in their lives. Any more? Happiness. Happiness is great. Actually, happiness I don't think we've heard much about here today. Anyone else? We're all quite happy. Yeah, exactly. So you're going to give me exactly the kind of things that I'm putting up here. I think happiness is important, and health and community and positive relationships, and things that sometimes get a bit subsumed in the quest for getting a good job and economic success. But without getting a good job and economic success, some of these other things are made much more difficult, and all of which implies that we have to do a lot more at school than just teach more traditional academic subjects in the traditional kind of way. And people love this bit too. Every conference you'll go to, knowledge, skills, values, attitudes, and behavior, all really good and important. But at the end of the day, what do we measure? It comes down to grades, that piece of paper that decides your future. You're going to put a lot of effort into that piece of paper. You know, forget about getting jobs or health and happiness. That piece of paper is everything if you're in that position. And it's what most government and most teachers and most schools and students focus on above and beyond everything. Oh, I might actually go back. Again, we, these are all the things that we want from schools, and we know that these grades, you get your grades in maths and English and etc. But what is it that actually, if we're going to get these jobs, do we need to provide? What do employers want? Again, a little question and answer. You can relax. It's the end of the day. Who's got some suggestions on what employers might actually want? Flexibility. Oh, there was one over there. Creative skills, yeah. Transferable skills. Staying power. All of these things. I mean, I've picked one particular study, probably not the most academic, but the top thing they're putting in that one is the ability to work in a team structure, so teamwork. The second thing they're putting is the ability to communicate with persons inside and outside of the organization to, I guess, give instructions, presentation skills. The third one, ability to make decisions and solve problems. You have to work your way down a bit the list to get to this one, technical knowledge related to the job, which is a few above the bottom. But that technical side of things is overwhelmingly what education institutions focus on at the moment, because what they're measured on is their technical results, your ability to score well in your tests. So how do we deal with this kind of grades conundrum? These are my little fictional characters. We have Smart Alec and Tricky Dicky, or Dicky who gets a D, and these are their results. If you're an employer, this is not only what the young people have to show for all their years, all their days of going to school, this is what you have as an employer to decide who am I going to give a job to in the first instance when all those CVs are all flowing in. And when you look at something that looks like that, who's not going to take the straight A student over the kid that gets the C's and lots of D's? It's a no-brainer. But can that be right that, one kid leaves school feeling a complete failure? This is the sum total of all his years of education is you are a failure, while the other kid gets to feel extremely smug, but possibly there are things they could still learn. I'm just imagining a world where we could actually have a more rounded picture where we're not going to ditch, these academic disciplines totally, but why can't we actually sort of include some things like team working, like problem solving, like creativity that was mentioned in there, and validate perhaps Tricky Dicky who isn't quite as academic, but actually might be great on some of these things. If you were an employer and you were presented with these kind of findings, you'd have a more nuanced view. And if what you really needed was someone who was good at being creative and working within a team, Dicky might stand a chance. We all know the stories of people who leave school branded a failure and then turn out to be a great success later in life. It can't be right that that's the case, and it can't be right, really, that some of the people who are academically smart don't ever get stretched or pushed enough in directions that might really be valuable to them in later life. Again, you've probably all met people who are super intelligent, but don't really have those kind of team working or communication skills. Why didn't they have a chance to develop it at school? There are plenty of people out there, the Bransons of this world, who we're undervaluing because of the way our system measures people. So another big question is, can we measure it? It's nice to talk about teamwork and creativity and problem solving, but what does that mean in the context of trying to understand who's doing well at it and who's doing less well at it? I don't expect you to be able to read any of this, and I'm not sure I can even read any of this, but this is sort of one of our framework just for looking at soft skills and how we go about looking at measuring those. So here you have things like leadership, long-term planning, building networks, aspirations, professionalization, etc. And on the far right column, the hardest one to read, are the measurement tools. There's My Voice student surveys in terms of aspirations and professionalisms. There are planning errands, problems type activities around looking at long-term planning skills. And these are tools that have been developed by researchers and validated and correlate to people's long-term performance. So these things exist. We don't have the excuse that we don't know how to measure any of it. So if we can measure it, You know, and people like UNESCO and everyone at this conference says, well, it'd be a good thing to do this. You know, can we teach it and how do we teach it? So just to give you a bit of a snapshot, I thought I'd explain a little bit how we at Teach a Man to Fish go about doing this. So we use a model that's around school enterprises. So rather than saying we're going to teach all these things as some academic curriculum and write it all up on the blackboard, we try and find a system where people can be engaged with it so they'll really want to learn. So there are blackboards involved. We help schools to set up school businesses, and the start of that is understanding a few business concepts, which you can do on the blackboard and alongside general education. But then it gets outside of the classroom, and the kids take part in field-based lessons. So you learn not just what the concepts are, but how you can actually practice them, how you can apply them for meaningful results. It's learning by doing, so it's hands-on. We know this is how people kind of learn best. They gain the practical skills needed in order to run those businesses. So you can see in a rural case, it might be things like looking after goats or producing vegetables, all types of businesses that are relevant to the job market there. But through the learning by doing, they not only gain the direct skills, but it reinforces the learning that takes place in the classroom. So when they learn about maths in the classroom, their math skills are being practiced as part of the finance on the business. They rotate through the businesses with specialization, so no students spend longer on businesses than they need to. You know, they're not really a workforce, but they're there to learn. And each year they assume greater responsibilities, and they mentor the students in the years below them. So this is, again, to show you some pictures. This could be beekeeping, honey farming. This could be egg production. This could be vegetable production. The kids are an integral part of all these processes. But not only are they involved on the sort of the technical skills side, which, again, is pretty common in many kind of vocational programs, but they really get integrated on the business side. So they manage financial transactions, they monitor the company's performance, they look at profitability, and they practice their math skills while they're doing that. They learn to market and sell their produce. And what we find is that, in fact, some of these skills are really the most powerful in terms of supporting them in the future. You know, if you want to sell to a customer, you need to be able to look the person in the eye. You need to be able to communicate with them. You need to be able to explain the benefits of that product to them to the point where that customer wants to buy from them. Now, that's a completely different kind of experience to sitting in a classroom, just talking to other kids. It's a completely different experience to learning rote memorization, but it's a really impactful one. Because what we see is that when the kids graduate, having been through this kind of model, they're the first, often they have offers of employment before they even get out the door. I think our school in Nicaragua, about 2/3 of them had job offers before they even finished school because of some of their placements within the school. But for the vast majority, it's something like 100% more or less get good jobs or able to create their own jobs or continue into higher education within 3 months of finishing at a school fully adopting this kind of model, which is a phenomenal achievement. And that's, the fact that we actually measure that, I think, is one of the things that makes the difference, because that then becomes part of the goal. So, whilst talking about measurement in more abstract terms, it can feel like it's the responsibility of the government to kind of come up with these systems, or, if PISA's not interested at the moment, this isn't something that we need to be doing. This is actually something, as a responsible school or NGO working with schools, or, whatever type of organization you are interacting with education, you can actually implement. First stage, I think, is finding out what happens to your students afterwards and using that as your benchmark for success, even if you don't want to go as far as measuring in detail some of those other specific disciplines. So these would be the sort of broad areas I'd suggest you can kind of look at. Academic achievement, yes. Employment and income of graduates after school. Are they not just in a job, but are they earning more than they would have been otherwise and earning more than their peers? The soft skills, which is trickier to measure but can be done. The transition to higher education and the technical skills that they pick up. You know, if we believe you get anything, you'll get what you measure. If you just measure academic performance, then you will just get excellence in academic performance at best and miss a few tricks. So to finish with a slightly happier story, which illustrates, you know, why we're so passionate about this kind of approach, we'll take Jorge's story. So Jorge was a student at our school in Paraguay and comes from this incredible family where there are 19 children. You know, it's a huge, huge family. There's no way his family can afford to pay for all the things any of the kids might need in life. But luckily, he was able to kind of go to one of our schools and get a really good education, and not just an ordinary one, but one that prepared him for life. So when he came out of school, and he did well in school, and he did well in those standard exams, and was offered a scholarship to one of the best universities in the country, he had to think about it a bit because he didn't have the financial resources in order to be able to support himself. You know, that's again, it's a system failing. You know, how is it that the smartest kids aren't able to even continue into university when the university wants them and will give them scholarships? But rather than doing what he might have done in so many other cases and just given up because he didn't have the money, he took what he learned at school and he put it to good effect. So he came up with a very entrepreneurial solution. He found an old age home that had a whole bunch of land they weren't using and struck an agreement with them that he would use that land to farm and to produce vegetables, and he would give them a cut of the vegetables. So then he would produce the remaining part, which he would sell on his own account. But he didn't just sell it on his own account, you know, by sitting by the side of the road. He created his own brand, BioGran, and managed to get hold of a stall in the elite market in the capital city. So by doing that, he both got some extra value for his organic production and was able to sell to customers who had more money. He took what he learned at school and he put it to good effect. And the income that he earned from running that stall and producing the vegetables was enough to see him through university, something that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So there he is, graduating, looking, well, this is just before, looking kind of smart. And that's where he comes from, you know, a shack in the middle of nowhere in deepest Latin America. You know, he was a student who was enabled to get an education, continuing education, because of the entrepreneurial and practical education he received. And then, because he loved it so much, he actually went on to become a teacher at that school for a short while to help the next generation before continuing his career. So it can end with a happy ending. But the message is, you know, really, measurement may be some kind of magic bullet, but it's not really enough of a magic bullet. We know magic bullets don't really exist. I think it is that powerful lever. It's a key way you can change things from your own work and push to have it change things at the higher level. But it does also need other bullets in the arsenal if we're really going to make the impact that we want. So I think we need a lot of transparency so that people can actually see what the results are coming out of the school are, so parents can understand them, future parents can understand them, the government can understand them, so we get schools competing on actual useful results. I think it takes a degree of accountability. You know, no matter how you measure things, if you can't leverage the system because teachers can't be fired, you're going to have a hell of a job making any of this work. You know, I was talking to a colleague the other day who'd given up on the school system in Rwanda out of frustration because, you know, they were doing great work with teacher training, but when it came to schools where the teachers weren't performing, it would take 3 years, literally, from the first measures being brought against teachers before the teachers left. You can't change things in that context. And I think articulation is a big one that's being mentioned time and time again, which is, you know, if you're going to know what the right things to teach are, you're going to have to link in with the future employers so that you can make sure that you have this kind of relationships where you're focusing on the right outcomes and the right measures. So I've left a good little bit of time for questions. Hopefully that's been interesting. I look forward to seeing what you have to ask. Thank you. Over here. Oh, I think there's a roving mic which will make its way to you. Oh. You know, this builds up the anticipation. You have time to make your question even smarter, but not too hard.
Hi, my name is Suhail from Kenya. My question is, in terms of scaling this, how successful have you been in terms of scaling this, and in terms of the engagement with the potential corporates or people where the job market really resides? How easy is it to integrate this? That's what I'd like to know.
Okay. No, I think that's a very good question. And in fact, there's a talk on scaling going on in the other room in parallel. And it was definitely one of the challenges we faced. I mean, the full model, which I was kind of presenting there, we found much harder to do in a large number of schools because it was really intense. The costs were pretty high. And it required an organization with a certain level of skills in the first place to be able to sort of fully adopt it on that scale. So our first kind of school in Paraguay has these 16 school businesses with sales of $400,000 a year, which pays for all the costs of the teachers. It's a super integrated model. It's brilliant, but that's been much harder. We've got about 15 schools around the world that are now doing that. But what we found, in fact, was we didn't have to do it quite on that scale at the individual institutional level to have a great educational impact on the students. So something we started up is called the School Enterprise Challenge, which is like a global competition for schools to set up a school enterprise as a start. It makes it simple and easy. We provide all the materials, and through that we've been able to really reach the huge scale, the 100,000 kids that was mentioned earlier. And that then puts it very much more in the camp of the school to make those kind of connections. And the best schools link directly with businesses, approach them, get the kids visiting the businesses visiting the schools, and do phenomenally. Other schools find it harder. But it certainly, either way, has been extremely empowering from the reports that we see back from the schools about building the level of skills, both of the teachers as well as the students. Because, again, it was mentioned in another session, teachers don't often have that much entrepreneurship experience, so how are they going to teach this thing? They learn alongside the students, and their role becomes much more mentor and facilitator. But the more, we're constantly looking for kind of corporate partners who are sort of interested in getting more engaged in this area, and we're going to do lots of stuff in Kenya, so it'd be great to speak later. Oh, one then the other, maybe.
Just a quick question. Have you done or implemented any schools in the Middle East, sort of Arab world? If no, are there any plans? If no, what would it take to bring some plans?
Completely. We started off with a very more developing country focus, and I guess the Middle East clearly is not quite in that position. But through this competition, we found that we can really support schools anywhere to kind of integrate these kind of approaches without it being sort of at a huge kind of cost to ourselves. So now we are really opening up and getting more schools in Europe, North America, and I think there have been a few in the Middle East, but not very many. So we'd love to have more schools in the Middle East taking part, in part because we try and make the links as well. So we'll try and link schools in developed economies with developing economies so they can learn about the business experience on both sides of the fence. And sometimes we even see, there's a school in Scotland that's importing produce made by a school business in South Africa and selling that as part of their fair trade cafe. It becomes very exciting to make those global links. So please talk to me again if you want to do that here. Sir.
Yeah. My question is around entry level. At what stage should kids be differentiated in terms of core academic abilities and abilities in other areas that are not academic? Is it after primary school, after secondary school?
Yeah, I mean, my personal view, and through the work of our organization, we think, you're never too young and you're never too old to start acquiring these skills and taking an interest. So the school in South Africa that was sending things to Scotland is actually, it's a pre-primary school, and obviously in a pre-primary school, the kids aren't doing anything much that looks like real work, but they get a feel of using the money. They get to create some posters to try and sell things. They have a fair at the school, and they sell things to the local community who come in. And I think all of that, creates communication skills, numeracy skills, a chance to talk to, to understand the experiences that they may face later in life. And I think it's exciting. They enjoy it. So you're really never too young. But as we work up the educational levels, you can make it more sophisticated, take it into greater depth, apply extra ideas. And at each level, it reinforces the rest of the curriculum. Is there maybe one last one, or otherwise we'll move on to one last one at the back.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering how important you sort of see this in terms of an approach to tackling kind of inequality in terms of access to sort of opportunity as well as skills. Because I think one of the things you're talking about with measuring things outside of academic success is providing new signifiers for what kids have, and that I think is great. But if a kid has signifiers about their academic sort of experience and signifiers about their creativity and so on, but still no access to the social networks and the other sort of things that are going to help them be successful, then they're still sort of stuck. So how do you really build in that access to some of the sort of social networks that will help them develop as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think it's a thorny issue and one that will, doesn't have easy answers. But I think, two really important characteristics that make the difference between, people who succeed and people who give up along the way are confidence and aspiration. And these are the kind of personal qualities I think you can really gain through taking part in some of these activities. And once you have aspiration, you have confidence, then you're more prepared to go out and seek to build those networks. I mean, I would encourage schools to do whatever they can to bring in business people, role models for that kind of inspiration and for the network element. But we know there isn't a level playing field. We know some people will be starting off behind, and the most we can give them is the best possible start. So that kind of the skills, the knowledge, the values, behavior, confidence, aspiration, then they can make of it what they will, but they'll be much better off than they currently are. So thank you everyone for listening. Please talk to me afterwards. Please take part in the program. Have a great conference.